This is going to be a short video because I didn't plan on filming it. The idea was just a quick project that sort of really just came to mind within a couple of minutes of sort of setting the timber out in its form. I'm really excited about this one because I haven't seen anybody do anything like this. It's a little bit different in terms of normal river tables. We'll still have a river in the middle, but our top's going to be skateboard grip tape. I did do a small test before I stuck the grip tape to the timber just to see if it would work, and it does. It worked better than I thought it would. I'll give you a look at that as well. So this is how the finished product will look. It's got a gloss coat on top of it, which sets exactly like glass. So this one's just going to be more of a demolding and then finishing project. Mitch 13 was the artist for this grip tape, and that was from Fruity Grips. So yeah, so that's about it. So I'm going to start demolding this. Hopefully it hasn't stuck to the form. That's my biggest worry at the moment, but let's see how we go. Okay, so it's been demolded now. I used a urethane mold release for this one. It's called Stoner. The last project I did, I used tape, and the resin stuck to the tape, which was on the board, and that just turned into a nightmare, and I had to plane the whole bottom. This one, I just used the mold release with no tape, and I wasn't sure how it was going to work, but it worked exactly how I wanted it. So this is the base of the board now. As you can see, the resin has seeped through under the mold, and it's created some holes, but I was going to be putting a clear base on the bottom of the mold anyway. So this kind of works. I'm just going to give this a sand and a tidy up, and then just with a clear coat over the top, and that should be enough for the bottom to actually make it look okay. Okay, so the next step now is to trim the sides. They're not too bad, but I just had to change my blade over on my table saw. So that's our next step now, get the sides trimmed up, and then we can look at sanding the base. One thing I forgot to mention is I use fiberglass in the river. The idea was to sort of have a really nice glowing rock effect, but the pieces I used I bought from Bunnings, they were too big and I couldn't get them small enough. So I did have to take it pretty slow through the table saw, and while I was cutting I forgot about it. So you can see in there that it's in there. The saw struggled a little bit, but it got it cut. Okay, so I've just given the sides a cut with the table saw, and I've just sanded the sides lightly with an 80 grit sandpaper with my orbital sander. So now what I'm going to do is sand the bottom. I'm going to start with 120, 180, 240, just to get rid of any of the imperfections, so I can then do a seal coat, and I'm probably just going to leave it after that. What I've also done here is I've laid down a blanket. I wouldn't normally do that because the top would get sanded anyway, but because I've got the tape on underneath, the grip tape, I don't really want that to get too scuffed up or damaged, so a blanket underneath is what I'm going to do for that. As you can see, I don't really need to go too heavy or for too long with this because it is the bottom. We don't really need to worry about it too much on how perfect it's going to be. There are some small holes, but they're just going to get filled when I do my seal coat anyway, so I'm not too worried about that. So that was 120, now I'll move over to the 180. It's also important too, between each sand, just to give it a wipe down, just to get rid of any of the excess dust. now that the sanding's been done, what I'm going to do is go over the table with a cloth and some methylated spirits. That's just going to get rid of any of the dust, and it's really going to make these colours pop. So let's have a look how that goes. So now we're going to sand the top of the table at 120 and 180 grit. This is going to create a mechanical bond that's going to give the resin something to stick to, opposed to just leaving it smooth. Now we're going to mask the bottom of the table so we can get ready for our top coat. Okay, so now that the bottom's masked, I'm going to be mixing up the resin now. I'm going to be using a product by All Purpose Coatings. It's called their clear epoxy, the EPO 100C. Generally you would work at about 1 ounce per square foot, but because I've purposely left the river slightly lower than the top of the table, I'm just going to sort of wing it. I've mixed up about 450 mils total, so I'll fill the river first, let it overflow, and then sort of see where it goes from there. Once we pour the resin, we're also going to be chopping it with a brush. So we're going to be using a 10mm square notch trowel. That's going to spread all of the resin evenly across the board. This one I'm not too fussed about just yet because it is only the first coat. So we're going to pour it, see where it's level, and then probably do 2 more, and then a finished gloss coat on top. Okay, so the first seal coat is on. I did mix 450ml. It was probably enough. So what I'm going to do is let this sit for about an hour or 2, and that way I can really get it to that tacky point and then pour the next one on without having to worry about sanding. There are some high and low spots, but it doesn't really matter yet because we're going to be going straight over the top anyway, and it is self-leveling.